Hey, Kat, how you doing?
Good. How are you doing today?
I am good today. I am busy today, but it's a good busy. I'm always counting the blessings when things are busy in that sort of way. So feeling good. Yeah. Well, listen, I want to introduce our guest because she's so cool and has so much to offer. And it's going to be great conversation. I'm so glad that we crossed paths and that she agreed to come talk with us because I think it's going to be super and amazing. All the things. Welcome,
Exciting.
welcome, welcome, Jenny. Hi.
Hi, so good to be here. Thank you for having me. I'm really looking forward to this.
Oh, yeah. Thank you for being here. I'm looking forward to it too. I got to know you a little bit, and Kat's getting to know you now. I would love for our listeners to know a little bit about you. Can you just tell us a little bit? Where are you from? Who are you? I
Yeah,
mean, let's get deep. Like, who
big
are you?
question. Let's
Who are
start.
you?
Yeah, so Jenny is my name. It's not short for Jennifer, which is a fun fact. People like to elongate the name. So it actually is just Jenny. I grew up in Southern California, so San Diego County, but live in Los Angeles now. And I'm eager to kind of get into a little bit of my background, but I come from a Cuban immigrant family. So I grew up with my mom, who is a school teacher, retired now, and spent most of my time in Southern California, but did a little stint in New York in my 20s because that's what you do a lot of
You're
times.
supposed to, I
Yeah,
guess.
you're supposed to, right? But yeah, so my background is in education and nonprofit management, and now I run a leadership development organization. That's kind of like the lane that I exist in. Yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Yeah, I dig it. I am a former teacher. I keep saying former. I still am teaching. I just don't
Mhm.
teach little ones anymore.
Yeah,
So I'm a former elementary school teacher. We'll put it that way.
nice.
And when I moved into different lanes, I was shocked at how transferable a lot of the skills and experiences are. And I think a lot of folks underestimate that. How does your experience sort of play into what you do now?
Yeah, I'm similar. I never was in the classroom, in the kind of the traditional sense, but I do identify as an educator
Hmm.
because, there's a lot of spaces where we learn, where we come
Sure.
together to learn and grow. And so, I found that, I worked in higher ed for a while and supporting college students kind of on their career journeys and their leadership development. And a lot of work happened kind of outside of the classroom and in that co-curricular space. And then transitioned to working with adults and kind of that same vein. We're in our professions, we're in our worlds, we have our career goals, but we shouldn't stop learning. And so
No.
that's where kind of the facilitation and the leadership development in those spaces kind of continued on. And so I've always been really interested in how, we all engage with the world and make sense of the world and how we make sense with each other and in these kind of group spaces and learning from those group spaces. And that seems to be kind of that common thread, no matter where I am in like quote unquote role title, that piece of it stays it, or at least it should stay the same as we grow in our careers. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Kat did like a whole little thing turn in for her education as she went from going to one space to her fashion industry because she had to, but loved it. And so I think no matter what we're doing, whether it's in higher ed, whether it's in I can't say the word, she's gonna make fun of me, aesthetics.
Aesthetic. No, you're right. You are right.
I feel like I have to extra stick my tongue out. Aesthetics. None of that. I mean, I agree. Like the learning who we are, how we move through worlds and interact with each other in all of these different ways, like it just manifests um, in all these wonderful ways. Yeah.
I'm curious, for the leadership. So if you could talk a little bit more about that, who are you guiding through this process? Like, are you guiding companies? Are you working with individuals?
Yeah, both. And I'll backtrack a little bit to kind of get at how I got to this space, particularly with the Untapped leadership work. So as I mentioned, my background's in education, in leadership spaces. I've gone on to get my doctorate in education. I did business undergrad. I did MPA, the Master's in Public Administration. Not to kind of, I love school, FYI.
What she's saying, y'all, is she's fancy.
I got
That's what I'm fancy.
No, I don't say that to say I'm fancy, but I did work hard.
Kidding.
But I like that. There's certain spaces where I do have to assert that,
I feel that.
So, but I don't usually.
Yeah.
But I kind of name that trajectory only because I've taken leadership courses and management courses pretty much in every stage. That was part of all of my degrees. And even through my doctorate degree, it was a leadership course that we began with. That was the whole start of the cohort program. All of the books and all of the theories that were in these classes were all developed by folks that did not look like me, probably didn't have someone like me in mind. Some of these older theories that we kind of started with really didn't have someone like me in mind because they were built in eras of exclusion and almost designed to exclude. Right. And so, I got to this moment. I mean, I think that fast forward to 2020 when I think we all had a moment of pause and reevaluation. And I just realized how much of the narrative was missing because voices like mine, as a woman of color in leadership, the voices that I, learned from other, historically underrepresented professionals that are really doing amazing work, but maybe not are in print in those books or looked at as the gold standard from this school syllabi, that we're missing out on a lot. And so that's really kind of where the Untapped Leadership work came about, just to, call out that, that's great. All those theories are there, but there's so much more that we've kind of systematically overlooked over these last few centuries. And so now there's an opportunity to really tap in, to uncover that, to look for that, to really be specific about that. And so that's what I help do with individuals and organizations. On the individual level, it's really, working with BIPOC identifying leaders, but this is kind of expanding to anyone that has felt kind of underrepresented in their professional spaces. How do you find your leadership identity and in an authentic way that maybe doesn't leverage the models that, again, weren't built for us? And then I do the same for organizations. How does your organization support untapped leadership? Are you just kind of doing the same old, and then wondering why your leadership bench is not diverse or not representative? How can we reframe that? So that's a little bit a longer answer, but it's relevant to kind of the point. So, yeah.
No, I like it so much. And there's something that you said that immediately I was like, oh, yeah. So I took a lot of these classes too with my programming and business psych, and we learned leadership styles and the various models, but you said find your leadership identity. And that hits a little different, I think, than your style. Anyone can have a style, and styles change. I mean, I guess who we are can change in some ways, or at least how we express who we are. But the two things, just saying, find your leadership identity, and then you said do it authentically, which, that's not always easy. So okay, first I got to figure out who I am, y'all, and then you want me to show it? That feels like a lot. But imagine if we could.
Right.
Right.
Right. And that's why I was I play in potential. I feel like we could really be onto something if we really harness this. If we kind of think about our persistent challenges and just all the things that I think our current world is struggling with. And again, you can really kind of narrow it into professional worlds, and we have seen some persistent challenges. If we can actually feel like we are contributing our best selves, and that coming from all these different walks of life, all these experiences, then I think we can solve a lot of the challenges that we have. That's
We're
my
gonna
hypothesis.
save the world. Mm-mm.
Low key, let's just save the world. Okay, can we just do that? Yeah.
Down for it.
So Jenny, I have a question for you. So it's so funny that you're talking about this because I had just gotten off a call today. I dabble, well, I don't, I more than dabble. It's like majority of what I do in terms of my industry, but I work in retail sales for makeup, beauty, all that stuff. And one of the things that we were discussing today is that years ago, and so I was going to ask you your opinion on if this is the same that you're finding in other industries. Years ago, we spoke a lot about leadership, your identity, and we really led with that. It was a lot less about the sales. And then with everything, and what ended up happening is as they knew each other, or as they knew themselves, their brand and everything, like the sales just kind of came, and they had more of a specific message, who they were speaking to. And we always say, like, when you're speaking to all, you're not speaking to anybody, right? So it was one of those things where it kind of was a reflection time today where I was like, I've been so careful to not push anybody to feel like this is too hard or it's going to land them when they're having to, like you said, authentically identify them. Like, that's a whole project within itself. So somebody's sitting here wanting to sell mascara and all of a sudden, like, no, we're going to get a little bit deeper. Like, they're like, well, I don't want to do this anymore. Like, nobody wants to do the work. I don't want to say nobody, but people don't want to do the work if they're signing up for one thing and all of a sudden, like, this is a deeper question. So I feel like I don't want to say the word coddling, but I feel like in the past years, because we've just come out of a pandemic and stuff, I've been more like staying away from the heavier topics and being like, okay, here's how easy it is to sell a mascara,
Yeah.
So my question for you is, has that changed over the years? In terms of like, are people as open to the leadership side of things, or are you kind of having to pull them there? I mean, like, no, you can believe in yourself. You can lead other people. Or is that been dimmed, over the years?
Yeah. Oh, so many layers to that.
Right.
Let's just get
So
into
many
it.
layers.
It's really easy. Yeah. Yes. And I think a couple things. So I do think we're in this moment, all of us, in this climate of society, of work life, everything that I think since the pandemic, since a couple of these, political cycles, that we are, feels like we're becoming less equipped to handle the hard stuff, or our window of tolerance for the hard stuff is thinner. Like we're carrying a lot. There's a lot going on. We've probably not, figured out how the pandemic experience actually, we carry that still, like really there's a lot to unpack, nonetheless. And so I do think the motivation to like take on more, willing, or to like really have these tough conversations, or like, just I'm selling mascara, but I'm also, how can I identify as a leader? Like I think folks are struggling with that.
Yes. That's what it feels like.
So I think there's that. And I think on the other side, I do sometimes, when I kind of going back to that question around leadership identity, I find that, folks more often than not do not consider themselves leaders. But like 80%, like that's a random number, but the majority, I would say, when I'm kind of connecting and talking about leadership, they're kind of looking at the positions on the top of their organization as the leaders, never themselves. Like we're always kind of this, this separation between, what a leader is and who we are, no matter where we sit in an organization. And so that's a lot of the work that I'm trying to shift, because that is also this antiquated narrative of like the leaders in charge, the leaders at the front, the leaders like, all the things that kind of siphoned that leadership definition to just a few people that we need to unlearn. And that's where kind of the practices of unlearning that. And so there is this other element of, for your example of kind of the sales reps, that it might just be a little bit of that unlearning, like, oh, I can actually, I have agency. I'm able to do this in the way that's most aligned for me. It might be a little bit more work, but it shouldn't. And I think that then we kind of look at the systems within which we're operating, so that when we can come authentically, that's going to be the easiest for whatever we're doing. That's going to be the most fulfilling. Yeah.
Yeah. And then at that point, it's like you're talking to your best friend in your marketing and everything else first, because you know who you are and who you're connecting to, versus trying to form out the perfect pitch or marketing approach or something,
That's right. Yeah. We're always already we're operating with abundance in that sense. Like who you are will just always be there. So you're just fueled to sell in a way that's most aligned. But when we start to do it this way, or just, trim, then all the calculus in the brain of like, okay, well, this is not really me, but I'm going to say these things, all of that comes into play. And I think that just lives across all of our spaces. But I would say there's these two different dynamics that make it challenging to do this work.
Thank you for that.
I mean, everything that you said makes total sense for a couple of things that I can think of. One is just kind of like what you said about who we imagine to be on those books, who wrote the books, wrote the models, and got them out, whatever. We also have for such a long time imagined that those are the people, that's what leaders look like. There's sometimes in workshops that I do, I'll ask folks, I'll do like a little visualization exercise where I talk about, imagine you're sitting in this huge conference room, this enormous oval table with comfy chairs, yet they're kind of formal all around the edges of this table. People start to sort of trickle in as they're preparing for this meeting, but the CEO is expected just isn't there yet. And so as people sort of are having their small talk, how are you, the weather, all the things, the CEO walks in and everyone turns their attention as they begin to speak. And then I stop there and ask people, what does the CEO look like? And, it's like, who do you have in your mind?
Yep.
Who can be? I'm a CEO. Could it be me?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Like, and sort of that thing that we've internalized about what a leader looks like, sounds like, how they move. People can't always imagine themselves being that person. And also, a leader doesn't have to be a CEO. There are formal and informal ways to lead. And I think people miss that. The second thing that came to mind is I often work with leaders who are emerging. They're kind of new in this space, and they show up feeling like, well, frankly, they're terrified because they think they're supposed to know everything because they got a new title. So someone gave you this new title, you get to update your LinkedIn profile with it, and it's super. But that doesn't mean like suddenly you're omniscient and you know everything.
Right.
You have all the answers. And so being able to have those conversations about intellectual humility and being able to share responsibility and leadership actually makes you a stronger leader. Who she's talking about are the people in the back of those books.
Yeah, and I think that's a piece of it. So Untapped Leaders came about through a book because I was just upset around I was mad. I was big mad on just the fact that it was 90% when I was kind of doing my research. 90% of these leadership books, the top ones that were that Google said were the top ones, were written by men and by white authors. And so it's not to discount those 90%. It's just to say, hey, that's not representative. There's other perspectives. That's just fact.
Yeah.
And so, that's where we should really be spending this next century, like exploring, like, what are these other perspectives or these other ways of leading, or how would we redefine some of these things if we had other folks, no matter who they are, just putting in their 2 cents on that bookshelf of what their leadership strategies or whatever it may be, whatever business, book approach there is, that there's more. There's more. Not taken away. There's more.
Right. We can add to it.
Yes.
As the academics say, we can add to the body of knowledge. I mean, that's,
and then the other piece of that, though, is add to the body of knowledge and then also include it as the canon, as the gold standard. Like, we can't just have, okay, these are the top ones, and then here are all the other books, by other authors. And that's, I think, what I still keep seeing is that, okay, there's this gold standard. That's where we have to kind of critically look at. Yeah.
So I got another question for you. Oh, looked like Kat had a question.
No, I
both
just
wanna go
wanted
in.
to apologize for whatever crash just happened here, and I hope that didn't cut into. Did you guys hear that?
I did, but I have magical editing tools.
Okay, great.
So
Wow.
afterwards, I will take care of it. So don't even worry about
Metal
it.
clanking on wood floor. Sorry. Mic on.
Don't worry. We're not live. So it's good. Okay, question. Oh, so I do have another question, and it kind of also stems from that. Find yourself in terms of your leadership identity. How do you, and I ask this kind of wanting to ask you too about yourself, how do you help not only yourself but others use or tap into, since we're going with being untapped, let's tap into it, one's own identity in terms of, like, how do you source from there to let your leadership style or who you are shine? So as you think about your childhood or your culture, or and on this show we talk a lot about racial and ethnic identity in terms of having multiple things sort of feed into this. How does any of that, none of that, all of that play a part?
All of it, I would say. All of it. And I would say that for me, it was a journey to get to this place of even just tapping into my own leadership, to defining leadership for myself, aside from what I've been given or told or read about. It took a long time to figure that out. And so, as I mentioned, so I grew up with the Cuban side of my family. I do identify as biracial. So my dad was from Egypt. I didn't meet him. So I grew up with my mom and my grandmother here in Southern California. Cuban family, but descendants from Spain. So they have fair skin, European features. No one looked like me in my family, to be honest, outside of, maybe a lot of folks will usually say the eyes. I think when they realize that you can't really make a connection between me and my mom physically, that's where I think my young experience of, just navigating identity started to form. I always kind of felt like, I love my family and very loving family, but aware of otherness.
Noticing a little bit.
Okay, yeah. And so it's just interesting how that kind of shaped navigating schooling, for example, as well. As I moved up in education and even in high school, as I started to take some of the honors and AP classes, I would be one of the only ones in that classroom that looked like me. And it just kind of, I feel like it compounded a little bit. Like I just was always in a space where I was an other that wasn't quite clearly defined. And so that just added on as I, navigated my career in, nonprofit management and, leadership development and all these spaces. Again, I'm reading these examples of leaders and, all these, the archetypes of what leaders should be, again, with folks that did not look like me. So I'm like, okay, I'm trying to figure my place out, where it's hard. And so, I think that over time and with experience and just with awareness and with work, I realized though that, that has given me kind of a nuanced perspective of the world and kind of realizing that I'm kind of experiencing workplaces, educational spaces in a way that's maybe different than others. And with that, that's an awareness of reality. I have a deeper awareness of reality because I can see where it's different for me than for others. And then also then, kind of the connection being that that's probably happening for other people as well.
Sure. Right.
And in other ways, and that this kind of depth of context of reality that's happening in all these spaces. And so that's a lot of the work that comes into the Untapped Leadership facilitation frameworks, the approaches of really tapping into context and leveraging that context to lead from there. And one piece of that is really digging into lived experience, into cultural upbringing, into those really, young experiences that we have that if we're not aware, we're realizing that they are connected to our day-to-day. They are informing how we navigate, how we make decisions, how we don't make decisions, how we opt out, all the things that we do. That's all being fueled by our histories. And that's going to be different for every team member, every person, that you lead, anything. And so if we can build that connection up and strengthen that, then we can lead with authenticity. We can kind of come back to that like leadership identity. Well, how does this inform my identity and the way I want to lead and the way I want to move things forward and the vision that I have and the vision of what I think is possible? Like, how does that play in? And I think if we can really, tap into it's too much of the tapping.
I know,
too
but
much
it
tapping.
works. I mean,
too much tapping.
Well, let's go with it.
But like if we can really align with that, then I think we just are living purposefully,
right,
in a way that's fulfilling and a way that we're now able to give again to the workplaces, the planet, the ways that we're meant to like live, and that helps us to again just have deeper impact, our deepest impact. I think that's where that lives. So long answer, but I think it just really is the basis of this work, and what has been, I think, devoid from other leadership approaches and other frameworks. When I was reading those books that I was assigned by these guys, these bros or whatever, these leadership bros, and I would read and I was like, it sounded good on paper, but there was always this moment of like, but I'm a woman of color. I'm like, like that piece of it's like, I don't know if I can do that. I don't know if I can pull that off, or no, I can't do that.
100%.
Yeah,
absolutely. My favorite is when it's like, you're just going to go in and ask for the thing because that's what you do. Sure. And you just stand and I'm like, who's going to ask for that? Not me, not like that. Anyway, there's got to be some finesse. You got to have some social capital. You got to, it doesn't work that way for everybody. Those books, like you said, do hold a lot of great nuggets, but they also hold a lot of assumptions of what everyone is coming with. Same thing with, not to pick on her, but the whole lean in thing. Like, yes, would love to. Will do so a little bit with caution. Or I tried that, got burned. And so I think there's, we definitely, there's truth to every single thing that you said, because while it's good to have these different perspectives and while we should not throw out all the old stuff, it is important to realize not everybody's showing up the same way with the same thing. And I was also thinking about, when I think about my identity and my identity journey, let's say it that way, I think like, who am I? Kind of like the beginning, I was like, and who are you? Right? Like, do you ever think like, who am I not? Right? I am not this. I am not this. Because, like, for example, I am not ever going to be that serious business suit wearing, like, show. That's not going to happen. You probably are going to get a random song with me at some point in a meeting. Don't matter. You are, I'm going to be just who. That's my authenticity. It's to also be like, who am I not? I also recognize that while I identify as a Black woman, that I do have a rich heritage, and I know I look how I look, which means that comes with privilege. So I could say I'm a Black woman, but I know I am not walking through the world the same way as other Black women. And they're not walking through the same way as I am, because we all are different. We all are going to have these unique experiences, and we all have privileges in one way or another, and we all face barriers in one way or another. So I was also thinking, like, while we're figuring out who we are, it's also probably good to tease out who we are not.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. That resonates. Yeah, I think and that's also part of my own leadership journey, because there were some aspects of like leadership, like the qualities, and you direct and you have vision and all these like
executive
things.
presence.
Yeah, and that was never. It was hard for me, to like I'm going to go out there and perform and pretend. But that wasn't me. I am the behind the scenes person. I like to be behind the scenes. I don't want to be in front. I like to take my time. I'm a slow processor. I'm not going to be fast. If all these things that I think are attributed traditionally to like leadership, or what were the leadership behaviors we're looking for, I wouldn't make it. I wouldn't make it, like I'd be out. And so I think that's where circling back to like having folks define leadership for themselves, when it really defined that question of like, what am I not? And that doesn't then mean I'm not a leader. That means I'm this kind of leader. This is how I act in my leadership. These are my leadership behaviors. But I think the other piece of that, then we need the world to value these other approaches.
Mm-hmm. All right, Dr. Jenny, how do we get the world to do it?
I mean,
No, seriously. But when you work with organizations and so on, that's part of it, right? Is to help them see. So what sort of things do you do with them to help them see this and value difference?
Yeah. I mean, I think that, the systems work is where I'm most interested, and it's the most challenging because, again, we all entered into these systems. They predate us. We are operators within them, and we all have varying degrees of power and privilege, and you kind of marginalized experiences within that, and that's always shifting. When I work with organizations, there's a kind of a few things I want to try to do. Traditionally, those in the top with the formal authority, not necessarily leaders. They could be, they often are, but those that hold the formal authority have the most power to have impact on how to value, again, the untapped potential and capacities of their diverse teams. So, I do work with full teams, but the ideal scenario is kind of training and support for executives that are then able to shift the way things happen within their organization. So a big piece of it is diffusing power.
Don't be taking my power.
That's hard.
That sounds hard. I don't know.
But that's, again, where the systemic shifts will happen. And I think where we will flourish, where others in any position in the organization can have space to be leaders, to lead in the way they want to sell mascara. This is where we're trying to get to. Maybe that the folks at the top will offer that. But then how you do that, I'm here to support. I'm a part of a team. I'm not the head of the team, that type of thing. And so it's a lot of, facilitated sessions work. It's tricky, though, because I think a lot of organizations will feel good about a facilitated session. That's a start. It's to start kind of sharing experiences, sharing language, bringing out more of these lived experiences, this like untapped potential that we don't usually have conversations about, and getting to kind of build those connections. But I think it has to go much deeper than that. So it's no silver bullet. I hate that term, but
oh darn,
yeah.
But it is true. It's true.
It's true.
What's coming up for you, Kat?
I'm actually really grateful for the space that we're in. And like I said, I was on a meeting with them today. This is a weekly meeting they have with their top executives and leaders. Like, so they're always like, what are you guys thinking? Like, they're always pulling us in. They're very humble. So I love that we have that space. They did just implement something monthly where we learn from different leaders in different industries. You come in and they may be in competing companies and it doesn't even matter.
I love that.
I love that.
Awesome. And I was on a call probably 2 months ago, and it wasn't even like a big thing, but I took away this one little piece of information. I was like, how am I going to, I need to like capture that and make this, we've got to apply this mindset. It was a mindset really, in other places. It was a DEI call, diversity, equity, inclusion call. I belong to a couple of different organizations, and we come together for like sharing circles or whatever. And in this one particular conversation, there's a woman who works for a credit union, and she was talking. The point wasn't about the credit union. The point was, I don't know what the point was because I got distracted when she said this thing. I'm not even gonna lie. Let me make up what the point was. I don't know. She said this thing, and I was like, and that's where I was like, how are we gonna do this, world? We have to do this. She said, well, we're a credit union, so we share everything. It's not like a bank. Like banks are for profit. And so basically, if they need a form for their HR, but they don't have it, and they know somebody else at some other credit union has it, they just be like, hey, can I have the thing? And they're like, yeah, you have the thing. Because there's no, the pressure isn't there to compete because they're all out for their members. It's not, so I was like, oh my God. So here's like a real live collaborative situation. They're still doing fine. Their members are their members, but they can work together in this bigger sort of organism that serves everyone. And I know realistically, we have a capitalist society and everyone can't do that. But oh my gosh, if we could adopt such a mindset, at least where it's like, we can make each other better so you can still do well and I can still do well, right? Like we can, what looks like good leadership where you are? And even if they share those things, it doesn't mean you're going to steal it because it could look different where you are, right? You could still apply some similar principles and it just take on a different shape or slightly different flavor. So anyway, when she told the thing about credit, I was like, I never even thought about that. Like, there is no competition. There doesn't have to be. You know why? Because they're for the people. And now I was about to do a really cheesy segue, y'all, but I'm not going to do it that way. So I do research with racial ambiguity, mixed racial heritage, ancestry, etc. And I ask a lot of people a lot of questions and surveys, interviews, and all the things. And I see that there's these different mindsets people hold. All of these folks, by the way, identify as mixed race in some way or mixed ethnicity in some way. But there are some who identify, even though they say, yes, I have mixed racial ancestry, I am Black or I am Asian, even though they will acknowledge these other ways of being. Then there are people who are like, I'm not half this, I'm not half that. I think, Kat, you and I talked about that, and I thought it was beautiful because she said, I'm fully this, I'm fully that. So there's sort of folks who identify as that way. And then there are folks who will acknowledge their racial ancestry as being different, having different elements. But they're like, if you could just stop talking to me about race. Actually, I have been called racist. I have been called racist for asking questions about identity in this way. And I'm like, how is that racism? And they're like, because you are focusing on race. Could you just stop? Now, we could make all the faces she making faces, y'all. I
can't fix my face.
make the faces too. I make them too when I'm by myself. But the truth is, I'm not going to take that from them because there is something that makes them feel that way, whether it's this focus on race that has caused them harm in the past, or they feel like, and some people do, like they're missing certain opportunities because there is a focus on people who don't have the same privileges that they have, but they don't see them as privileges, right? Do you feel like there are times when it is more appropriate to lean into these aspects of our identity than others? Or do you think that we should try to make that less salient to all of us? Like, I just wonder what your thoughts are, both of you.
There's so much nuance and I think context to this that I think what is unfortunate with where we are is there are racial histories and present day racial realities that have not been reconciled. And so therefore, race plays such a prominent role in everything,
whether we wanted to or not.
Whether we want it to or not. I lean very heavy into identity in the leadership work, only because it has been overlooked again for centuries, that we've just, again, by design, a lot of us with just overlooked, underrepresented, marginalized identities have not been in play in the leadership space, in representation, and all that spaces. And so my hypothesis is that we're missing out, not that being of a marginalized identity equals leader, not that, because that would be kind of the problematic issues that we had when we first started talking about leadership. But navigating this world with a marginalized identity gives you a set of perspectives, a set of maybe tools, strategies to still thrive and to be aware of everything around you that equips you to lead. Yeah. That's my hypothesis. And so there's like two sides of this where I can see why she's just like, let's not. And also there's purpose in kind of claiming identity as well. So it's tricky. I think it's like just kind of navigating the systems again that just are not well built, because they're sitting on eras of exclusion. And so I don't know. What are your thoughts?
No, I 1,000% agree with you. Actually, you were saying everything I was thinking, but I put it in the way of your experiences lead to empathy for so many other people's.
And while we can't understand everything, we can certainly provide the space for people to tell us, and, give that opportunity for them to share what their experience is and why this particular policy, rule, regulation, or practice at work, whatever the thing is, isn't necessarily what we thought of as a best practice. It's a practice, but is it best for all? So, wow. Y'all made me think today. I appreciate it.
So good.
Now, this has been so great. That's why I love having these conversations. Having folks like you on, Jenny, we get to share not only where we're coming from, but hear from you. And then you, of course, have all this experience with so many of the amazing people you work with. And you've gotten to see firsthand how these things can be applied. And so thank you so much for sharing that with us.
Thank you. This was wonderful. And again, very thoughtful conversations. It's nice to have them. Wish we could do it every day.
I know, right? I dig it. So where can folks find you? And they want to, because I know they're going to be like, I'll find me some Dr. Jenny.
God, I might say, go with Dr. Jenny.
Find you to hire you. Okay.
Well, so you can learn more about Untapped Leaders at untappedleaders.com or at Untapped Leaders on Instagram and LinkedIn. But I'm also available on Instagram and LinkedIn as well at Jenny Vazquez-Newsum. It's a little long, 2 Z's in the Vazquez, but I make everyone spell out my whole last name. So
there you go. Well, I will also make sure to link it in the show notes so folks can find you that way too, even if they don't know where the 2 Z's go. So I'll put you in there. Is there any shout out or thought or anything else you want to share before we close?
Thank you, with gratitude, for this conversation and just kind of the ethos of true colors and just the nuance and depth that I think it sits there. And so if we can kind of bring it out, it's great. I really enjoyed this.
But thank you. Thank you.